You see, by promoting this farce, LDS missionaries get people to believe that the production of the Book of Mormon prior to publication was miraculous, and therefore God was behind the whole thing, and they do this by saying it happened in 60 to 90 days. Well, let me just step back and give you some facts to remember, okay? The first thing to remember, in fact, I'm going to use this board to display this, okay? The first thing to remember is that well before Joseph Smith, I'm going to turn it this way. Can you see it this way? Well before Joseph Smith got the Book of Mormon plates, or before he had a vision of the angel Moroni, he would tell stories to his family at night about Book of Mormon characters, how they lived, what they did, etc., etc. This was before the angel came to him. This was before he received the plates. This is going way back to 1822, 1823, okay? And so then as we move along, then we come up, and he announced the existence of the said plates in 1823. So now he says, an angel came to him and told him there were some plates buried in a hill. This is when it's announced, 1823. But we go on, and Joseph claims he received the gold plates 4 years later, okay? So, just to show you, he first has been telling stories about what supposedly existed here in the Americas of these people. He then says in 1823 he actually is told of the plates, and 4 years later he says he gets the plates. Okay? So we have 4 years here where he has been able to develop an outline, at least, some type of general view of what the book would be about. It's not a matter of 60 or 90 days of Joseph Smith coming up with this thing. It's a matter of 4 years, 4 months that he says he received the gold plates. Okay? After this point, we have a story that is very different from Joseph Smith getting the plates, sitting down, and translating them in those days. Okay. And then it was January of 1828, 4 months after he got these plates, so another 4 months, that he says that he started to translate. So that is January 1828 now, that he says he starts to actually translate. This has nothing to do with a period of time of sitting down, and 60 to 90 days later, this coming forward when he first sits down. We have 4 years, 4 months that Joseph says he now is beginning to translate. So ask yourselves, would this be enough time for somebody, 4 years, 4 months, at least to flesh out a general outline for a book, especially if you were reading all sorts of books that were very popular at that time about civilizations being in the Americas that came from ancient places like Jerusalem? I would have to say yes, certainly. So by June 14th of 1828, the first 116 pages had been tediously produced at the rate of 1 page per day, less than 1 page per day, and then Martin Harris loses those first 116 pages that were translated. And in the face of these lost pages and the personal tragedies mentioned before, Joseph is forced to reevaluate his direction and his forthcoming book called the Book of Mormon. In the end, he claims he conveniently received a revelation after the lost pages, and this would be the first revelation of many, where Joseph Smith is now starting to consider himself a prophet. He had nothing to lose. The churches rejected him. He was having bad trouble in his personal life with his wife and his health and children dying, and he had lost the first 116 pages. His only recourse would be, I've got to start having God speak to me and tell people what God is saying to cover his tracks. 2 other important things about God speaking to him. First, the Lord tells him when he does start back up translating the plates after the 116 pages are taken by Martin Harris's wife, the Lord tells Joseph, go back to the plates, but translate from another section that tells the same story that you wrote in the first 116 pages. This other section is going to give you more information about my gospel. So we can see that it went from being a ancient American history with the first 116 pages. Those are taken by someone and hidden, waiting away to see what the next translation will bring. And so then the second translation becomes a religious book. And Joseph starts receiving revelations from God, and Joseph Smith starts becoming the prophet. His mom and his brothers leave the Presbyterian Church at this point, and there's this whole movement afoot to suddenly help him get this new church, this restored church, going. Joseph was also told by God in another revelation, just to let you know, that God would provide him a scribe, or the means by which he could fulfill this thing that he was called to do. And so then in September of 1828, Joseph Smith started translating from the new section of plates, the new 116 pages for the Book of Mormon that would ultimately be the Book of Mormon that we have today without the changes. Now, it's important to understand, from September of 1828 until the scribe that he was promised by God would come, Joseph had Emma, Joseph had Martin Harris, Joseph had Emma's cousin, and Emma's brother, and Joseph had his own brother serving as a scribe for him, okay? And he was still arduously pumping out maybe a page to a half a page a day of translation. Why? Why was he only pumping out a page or a half a page of translation with these people helping him? But then when the person shows up that the Lord said, I will send you, suddenly they go to 9 pages a day, and they produce the rest of the Book of Mormon in a matter of somewhere between 60 and 90 days. I'll tell you why. Because Emma and Martin Harris and Emma's brother and Joseph Smith's own brother were being conned. And Joseph Smith, behind the curtain, did not, intelligent as he was, he could not provide quickly the story that would become the Book of Mormon. He didn't have it in his ability to do this alone. He had to watch everything he said because the people who were translating weren't in on the con. Somehow he needed to have somebody who would be in on the con come in and serve as a scribe so the two of them could bang this thing out together. Somebody who was capable, somebody who could be trusted, somebody who was smart. And so in April, guess what? The Lord, the following year, now we're in 1829, God comes to Joseph and says, stop translating, Joseph. In other words, Joseph says to himself, I can't do this anymore. We're not going anywhere. I can't get it done. And so God says, stop translating for a season, and I'm going to send you this scribe. And so the scribe comes on down the pike, and the scribe shows up on the scene, and they begin to produce this Book of Mormon, the rest of it in a matter of 60 to 90 days. Who was this scribe that was sent? His name was Oliver Cowdery. This is the introduction of a man in Mormon history named Oliver Cowdery. Now, if you watch LDS films, you think Oliver Cowdery is walking along a country road, and he just happened to hear about this Book of Mormon thing and stopped by and said, hey, I'm able to write. I used to be a teacher. Can I sit down and help you out? Let me tell you a couple things about Oliver Cowdery before we go to the phones. Oliver Cowdery was born on October 3rd, 1806 in Vermont. According to D. Michael Quinn and his book Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview, page 34 through 36, Oliver's father, William Cowdery, followed a religious leader who called his sect the New Israelites. That's a restorationist thing, meaning Oliver Cowdery's father believed in a restoration of a gospel out there in Vermont and practiced all kinds of occult and folklore things as part of this religious movement. That brings them in close connection in terms of their practices with Joseph Smith. This would make sense because Doctrine and Covenants section 8 talks about Oliver Cowdery having the gift of using a divining rod. And God speaks to Joseph about Oliver's gift of being able to use this to receive revelation. So you can see they're in cahoots when it comes to the occult practices. All right? Oliver was raised in Pulteney, Vermont, which is known, but very rarely shared by the LDS, that Oliver was related to Joseph Smith. They were distant cousins. And in fact, when Joseph's mother and father went to visit him in September of 1829, guess who was staying at their house? Oliver Cowdery. He was staying at their house well before he had ever gone to help Joseph Smith translate in the state of Pennsylvania. Additionally, and most significantly, significantly, among circumstantial evidence, while living in Pulteney, Vermont, the Cowdery family attended a congregational church. The pastor of this church was named Ethan Smith, no relation to Joseph. That was back in 1823, in the year Joseph said that there were some gold plates buried in a hill near his home. Oliver Cowdery's pastor, Ethan Smith, was in the process of writing a book called View of the Hebrews. This book speculated from a Christian writer that Native Americans came of Hebrew origin, okay? According to LDS author Richard Bushman's book, Rough Stone Rolling, during the colonial period of American history, many Americans speculated about the possible connections between Hebrews and the American Indians. So the concept was not original, and Pastor Smith joined in the hypothecation about this topic by writing a book, and it became very popular. Okay, so Oliver Cowdery's family belongs to a church. The pastor of that church writes a book called View of the Hebrews, and 4 years later, Oliver Cowdery becomes the scribe for Joseph Smith to write a book that has the same themes running through it. Are there other themes in it, in the Book of Mormon that aren't in the View of the Hebrews? Absolutely. But there are plenty of similar themes to show that Oliver, when he became Joseph's scribe and he was in on the con, they sat down together, they got rid of all the props, no more Urim and Thummim, no more blankets, all this stuff, and they wrote this book out, and they used the general outline that Joseph Smith had concocted for 4.5 years. They added in religious elements, and Oliver Cowdery brought all his knowledge of a restorationist movement to Joseph as they sat there and concocted the book.